When I first moved in with Ryan, I didn't expect him to become the center of my world. He was just supposed to be a roommate, someone to split rent with, someone to share an occasional beer or joke in the kitchen. But there was something about him, an ease in the way he carried himself, the unshaken confidence that made him seem untouchable. He was the kind of guy people gravitated toward without even realizing it, and I was no exception. The mornings always started the same. He'd shuffle out of his room half asleep, hair a mess, but still managing to look good without trying. I'd already be at the table, laptop open, sipping on coffee, and he'd grin at me like I was part of the rhythm of his day. Those little smiles were dangerous, though. They made me forget that he wasn't mine to think about, not in the way I did. Ryan had a girlfriend, Chloe. She wasn't around all the time, but her presence lingered in the apartment. Her perfume sometimes clung to his jacket, draped over the couch. Her laugh echoed faintly in my memory when I washed the glasses she had used. Whenever she stayed the weekend, I'd hear the muffled sound of them talking late at night through the wall, and I'd force myself to turn up my headphones, pretending it didn't sting. Ryan adored her, or at least that's what it looked like from the outside. He'd talk about her with the casual fondness of someone who had nothing to hide, and every time he did, I reminded myself he was a line I couldn't cross. But then there were the nights when it was just us. He'd knock lightly on my door, asking if I wanted a drink, and we'd end up sitting in the dim glow of the kitchen light long after midnight. That was when Ryan let his guard down. He'd talk about his job, the stress of always trying to meet expectations, the fear of not being enough. I'd listen, nod, sometimes offer advice, but mostly just let him spill the words that seemed too heavy for him to carry alone. Those moments were intimate in ways that scared me, not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't. Sometimes he'd lean against the counter, his shoulder brushing mine as he laughed at something stupid I said. Sometimes he'd hold my gaze a second too long, like he was waiting for me to break the silence and name what was happening between us. But I never did. I told myself I was imagining it, that the flicker of warmth in his eyes was just a trick of my own longing. He was straight. He had Chloe. There was no room for me in that picture. Still, the tension lingered, quiet but undeniable. I found myself memorizing the curve of his smile, the sound of his footsteps in the hallway, the way he smelled faintly of soap and cologne after his showers. My affection for him grew in silence, in stolen glances and unspoken thoughts. It was torture, and yet I couldn't stop. Chloe visited less often than she used to. I never asked why. Maybe her schedule got busier. Maybe distance had crept in without either of them noticing. But the nights without her felt different. The apartment seemed quieter, heavier somehow. Ryan would sometimes linger in the doorway of my room, leaning against a frame with a careless grin, asking me about my day. His presence filled the space in ways I couldn't explain. I'd laugh, answer casually, but inside, I was unraveling. One Sunday evening, after Chloe had just left from a weekend stay, Ryan sank into the couch next to me. The TV was on, but neither of us was really watching. He stretched, his arm brushing against mine, and didn't move it right away. My chest tightened. It was such a small thing, but it carried the weight of everything I tried to ignore. I shifted slightly, creating space between us, and he gave me a look I couldn't read. Something lingered in the air that night, unspoken but live, like a storm gathering in silence. As I lay in bed later, I told myself it was all in my head. He was straight. He loved Chloe. I couldn't afford to believe anything else. And yet, in the quiet darkness, I replayed the way he had looked at me, the casual touch that hadn't felt casual at all, and I wondered if maybe, just maybe, he wasn't pretending either. The change was subtle at first. Ryan started noticing me in ways he hadn't before, or maybe I just hadn't let myself believe it until then. His compliments felt different, too pointed, too personal. "You always know what to say," he'd murmur late at night, or "You're easy to be around." Small words, harmless on their own, but they landed like sparks in the dry timber of my restraint. Every time he brushed past me in the hallway, every time his hand lingered on my shoulder, I felt the ground shift under my feet. I tried to tell myself he didn't mean anything by it. This was Ryan, charming, effortlessly friendly, the guy who could make anyone feel special without even trying. But then there were the glances that lasted too long, the quiet moments that stretched until my heart pounded in my chest. It felt like a game neither of us admitted we were playing. The night it happened, he came home late. I was already in bed, half asleep, the apartment cloaked in silence. I heard the front door creak open, his footsteps uneven as he stumbled inside. He was drunk. I could tell by the sluggish thud of his shoes hitting the floor. The clatter of keys dropped carelessly on the counter. I expected him to collapse into his own bed, but instead, my door eased open. I froze, pretending to still be asleep. The mattress dipped beside me as he climbed in, his breath warm against my neck. My mind raced. Maybe he thought this was his room. Maybe it was just a drunken mistake. But then he whispered my name, low and deliberate, and all the excuses I clung to unraveled in an instant. I turned to face him, heart hammering, his eyes heavy-lidded but intent locked onto mine. He wasn't pretending to be asleep, wasn't pretending at all. His hand found mine in the dark, fingers hesitant but sure enough to tell me this wasn't an accident. "I can't stop thinking about this," he murmured, the word slurred but honest, raw. I wanted to pull away. I wanted to remind him of Chloe, of the promises he'd made, of the line we both knew we were about to cross. But where his thumb brushed against my skin, gentle and uncertain, the protest died on my lips. The silence between us grew thick, almost unbearable. I could feel his hesitation, his fear, but also something else, desire, reckless and uncontained. Slowly, cautiously, he leaned closer and his lips brushed mine. It wasn't dramatic, wasn't rushed. It was tentative, almost fragile, but it broke me all the same. For a moment, I let myself drown in it. The warmth of him, the softness, the way his breath hitched like he'd been holding it in for years. My mind screamed about Chloe, about betrayal, about the wrongness of it all, but my body betrayed me too. I kissed him back. The world outside, that bed didn't exist anymore. It was just us, tangled in a moment that blurred the line between right and wrong. His hand slid to the back of my neck, pulling me closer, desperate in a way I'd never seen from him. Every touch, every sigh carried the weight of something forbidden, something we both knew we shouldn't want but couldn't resist. I should have stopped it. I should have pulled away before it went too far. But the truth was, I didn't want to. I had wanted this for so long, dreamed of it in silence, and now that it was real, I couldn't bring myself to let it go. When it finally slowed, when the rush of it ebbed, and we were left breathing hard in the dark, guilt settled heavy on my chest. He lay beside me, silent, staring at the ceiling. The air felt charged, fragile, like one wrong word could shatter everything. Finally, he whispered, "Don't tell anyone." His voice was rough, but there was a plea hidden beneath the command. I nodded, though I wasn't sure he even saw it. We didn't speak again. We just lay there, the distance between us both too small and impossibly wide. I closed my eyes, but sleep never came. All I could feel was the echo of his touch, the taste of him still lingering, and the crushing weight of knowing we had crossed a line neither of us could uncross. Morning came like punishment. The sunlight filtered through the blinds, sharp and unforgiving, and for a moment I let myself believe it had all been a dream. But then I felt the dip of the mattress where Ryan had slept, the faint warmth still lingering there, and reality hit me with a weight I wasn't ready to carry. He was already up when I walked into the kitchen. He stood at the counter, pouring coffee like it was any other day, like nothing had shifted between us in the dark. He glanced up when I entered, offered a small nod, but his eyes darted away quickly. Neither of us said a word about what had happened. We just went through the motions, coffee, toast, quiet sips, while an unspoken truth pressed down on us like a secret we were both too afraid to name. I kept waiting for him to acknowledge it, to offer some explanation, or maybe even an apology, but he didn't. He acted normal, maybe too normal, his voice steady but his hands betraying him with small tremors when he set his mug down. Every second stretched painfully, each silence heavier than the last. I wanted to ask him what it meant, what we were now, but the words lodged in my throat. Days passed like that, thick with avoidance. We laughed at dumb TV shows, argued about groceries, shared late-night snacks in the kitchen. On the surface, everything looked the same. But beneath it all, the memory of that night burned hot and raw, impossible to ignore. Every glance we shared was loaded, every brush of his hand against mine accidental, but not. Chloe came by the following weekend. I tried not to look at her, but my eyes betrayed me. She was kind, sweet in a way that made my chest ache. She curled up against Ryan on the couch, her head on his shoulder, her hand in his, and I sat there pretending my skin didn't crawl with guilt. She laughed easily, unaware of the fracture that had already opened beneath her. Ryan played his part well, smiling, kissing her cheek, acting every bit the devoted boyfriend, but I noticed the cracks. He seemed distant, distracted. Once, when our eyes met across the room, he looked away so fast it was almost painful. I couldn't escape the shadow of betrayal. Every time Chloe smiled at me, every time she asked me a casual question about my week, I felt like I was lying just by existing in the same space with her. I told myself I hadn't meant to hurt her, that none of this was her fault. But the truth was cruel. She was collateral in something she hadn't chosen, hadn't even suspected. After she left, the apartment felt different again. Ryan and I barely spoke that night, but the silence wasn't the same as before. It was heavy, charged with something unsaid. I lay awake in my room, and when the door creaked open, my heart stopped. He didn't come inside this time. He just stood there for a moment, silhouetted in the doorway, before walking away. I listened to his footsteps fade down the hall, and wondered if he was fighting the same war inside that I was. The days that followed settled into a strange rhythm. We didn't talk about what had happened, but it lived between us, breathing in the spaces we left unsaid. Sometimes I caught him watching me, his expression unreadable. Sometimes his hand brushed mine, and neither of us pulled away fast enough. It wasn't love, not yet, not something as clean or simple as that. It was messier, heavier, a secret bond forged in betrayal, tethering us to each other in silence. I didn't know if he regretted it. Maybe he did. Maybe he woke up every morning wishing it hadn't happened. But sometimes, when his eyes lingered a second too long or his laugh softened just for me, I wondered if he wanted it again. I never asked. He never offered. We lived in that fragile in-between, caught between guilt and desire, knowing we'd already gone too far to go back. Sometimes, in the quiet moments, I thought about Chloe, about her smile, her trust, the way she leaned into him without hesitation. She deserved better than the silence we gave her. But I couldn't undo the night he climbed into my bed, couldn't erase the way it felt when his lips found mine. That memory lived under my skin, both a wound and a comfort, and I carried it with me even when I wished I could forget. In the end, I didn't frame it as a triumph or a tragedy. It was just a truth, unvarnished and raw. We crossed a line, and nothing would ever be the same again. The secret was ours alone, faceless and silent, but no less real for it. And though I didn't know where it would lead, I knew one thing for certain. Once you cross that line, there is no pretending anymore.